Hello, everyone. My name is Romano Ninassi, and I'm the head of partners and alliances here at Redpanda. I'll be the host of this next session entitled Evolving an Event-Driven Architecture to an AI-Driven Architecture. I'm joined by Oded Nahum of Ness Digital Engineering. I've had the honor and pleasure of working with Oded and the extended Ness team for many years. They're also one of our leading SI partners at Redpanda. Oded, if you're out there, welcome, my friend.
I'm here. Thanks, Romano.
Great.
Thanks for hosting us. Great to be here.
Absolutely. No, and thank you for joining us in this session at Streamfest. As usual, let's begin with a little bit of introduction. So please tell us a little bit about yourself and Ness.
Yeah, so you see my title there at the bottom. I lead the cloud and data streaming practice at Ness. Our team, global team at scale. We cover the world from India to the West Coast, basically dealing with interesting challenges around cloud and data streaming, building systems, a lot of it about data, automations, processes, very strong in AWS, but also doing Azure and some other fun stuff. Also in the data streaming space, we've been doing this for a long time. Started with Apache, Kafka, and Flink, and built some of the first really large-scale stream processing platforms, predominantly around financial services. Yeah. And Ness, if you look at Ness as a company, we're a software engineering firm. We've been around for quite some time. It's kind of a industry kept secret, but we've been a 30-year company. What Ness is really good at is what we call product engineering. That means that our focus is looking at not just providing you engineering, muscle, but actually looking at the entire product and product lines and the evolution of product. So we cover the end-to-end kind of a transformation around that. Our focus is on several industries, not all of them. Financial services is definitely the largest one. But we also do a lot of work with manufacturing, transportation, IoT, tech companies, media, retail. And again, we've got this hybrid mode of consulting-driven work, which is kind of the team that I'm in, and engineering at scale. And again, we are a global company covering India, Europe, US, Canada, about 3,700 people. One of the interesting things about Ness is the average tenure of a client is very, very long. It's like 9 years plus. And some of our clients are much, much longer than that. We are a KKR-owned company, so private equity. That's kind of about Ness.
Oh, great. No, thank you for that. So let's get into some of the questions here. And let's start with the title. Right. I know it's a little bit of a controversial maybe title where, you have to have AI in everything you say and do, it seems lately. Yeah. But what is an AI-driven architecture and how does it differ from an event-driven architecture, more importantly?
So given that, we've been doing these things for a long time, so event-driven architecture has always been kind of how we're building systems, right? And it is at the core of Kafka and Redpanda. And the way that we're kind of looking at this, these are, decision-making systems, right? If you think about it, we've got data coming in as events, right? And then those events are stored in topic, and then we have something that picks up those events, and they need to make a decision. How am I going to process that event, right? And that business logic is hard-coded. It's very kind of a deterministic in the way that it works. And by the way, many times it sits outside of the actual platform. It's in consumer applications, downstream systems, in the Flinks and the works, right? So there's a kind of a natural fit for us to start thinking about decision-making in a much more smarter way, if this is kind of the way that we understand it. Now, one of the easiest things to understand how this thing fits is look at an event as a prompt, right? And this is not new, by the way. If you look at how chatbots work, it's kind of what it is. You type in a chat, and that recreates an event, and the system responds to that. So I think the second reason of why we are thinking this is a very interesting way to start understanding agentic AI is the notion of time. data streaming, Kafka, event-driven architecture, all of them, time is a very important component. I mean, an event is a piece of data that has a timestamp, and in many, many cases, that timestamp has huge importance in the business case that we're building, right? Hence why we call it real time. But when we operate at that scale, where a decision needs to be made quick, or we lose the relevancy of that data, this is really where we want to understand how decision making. And I really like the example that was made earlier by Johannes about fraud detection. Is like everybody talks about fraud detection. This is something that time is important. I mean, if you look at how the large banks are doing this, these guys are processing millions of events, per second, and they need to make decisions, and they sometimes get it wrong, and that takes time, and offloading to people and all that kind of stuff. These are the areas where we're kind of operating.
Yeah.
Now, adding to that, the strength of the LLM, which is incredible. LLMs do incredible things. They have the ability to reason and to build context and to understand dependencies and sequence and patterns. This is typically what humans have been doing, right? And this is kind of where we see this thing would fit. So we're moving from a very rigid, hard-coded, deterministic intelligence to something that is adaptive, that can learn, that can reason, that can evolve over time, and hence kind of the evolution. Now, this comes with an enormous amount of complexities and challenges, and definitely governance is kind of the topic of the day. Everybody talks about governance. I think there's other stuff that we need to solve beyond governance. I think like security and privacy and cost. We're not really talking much about cost these days. Everybody's going crazy about building stuff. We're not suggesting let's run every event into an LLM and make a decision. Never going to work. It's going to cost a fortune. But that's kind of how we are understanding this. There's use cases where stay with where you are. It's good. It's solid. It works at massive scale. And there are these corner cases where agentic AI adds an enormous amount of value into these platforms.
Mm-hmm. No, great for that. So some of the key points I heard, think of your data as having, some time associated value with it, right? The more you can take advantage of the data in real time, the more valuable it's going to be. And that's where agentic AI, I think, is going to be able to take advantage of that to the next level. And if folks are trying to move from, event streaming architectures to, AI-driven architectures, right? It's about evolving, what was maybe more deterministic into more adaptive architectures, right?
Yeah.
And Lisa, want to sort of hone in a little bit, though, is a governance. As you know, given our announcement around agentic data plane, we see governance as a key requirement there. If you could maybe expand a little bit, what do you see as the role of governance relative to agentic AI?
Yeah. It is a challenge. It is a challenge. I don't think we're completely figured this thing out. Governance, it's that overarching framework that controls agent behavior, right? It defines, what the agent can do, what they cannot do, where they can do it, when they should stop. In the past, if we had like static rules, so this becomes now a dynamic kind of a boundaries that allowing the agents to work within those control boundaries, which, to be honest, I don't think we figured out exactly what the boundaries are, right? And if we're looking at this, there's multiple kind of layers of control that we're seeing governance. One of them is the access boundaries, which is pretty standard, right? What data sources or other systems can agents access? And I think Redpanda kind of sits exactly in that right position. Redpanda Connect, very powerful tool that essentially creates that central nervous system between connectivity of systems. Behavioral boundaries, right? This is a little bit of kind of a human concept, right? How do we now build some control over how the agents behave? And there's like, funny incidents on the internet where people look at how agents behave under certain conditions and like, what the hell were you thinking? And then we've got things like ethical, compliance, privacy, which we're still kind of in the wild west over there, because I'm not even sure there's good regulations to control some of that. But the biggest challenge I think I see in governance is that we have to find the balance between giving the agents enough autonomy so it becomes useful and powerful, but then not letting it go crazy and do stuff that we don't want to do. And that's going to be a continuous exercise of tuning and enhancements and training and retraining and stitching different things. And I think fully autonomous agents, what I'm seeing, it's an aspiration. We're getting there. We'll get it right. But I think today we are kind of in the early days of moving from an agent that is very kind of I give you a task and it responds back, to I'm giving you goals and you can do stuff, but I'm still going to be the the human in the middle that controls that. And ultimately we'll get to a point where fully autonomous, go ahead and solve world problems.
Yeah. Thank you for that. I agree with you, right? And that's what I love about the agentic data plane is that it's trying to be the convergence of data, governance, and AI coming together, right? They have to sort of coexist in a safe environment. One of the things you talked about was, organizations, and we've seen a lot of reports around this from MIT and so forth, are investing pretty heavily in AI and now agentic AI. But it still seems many organizations struggle with where to start and how to achieve the right outcomes with AI. So based on your experience, what you're seeing with customers, where is agentic AI the most impactful today, and where is it overkill?
Yeah, just on that, research, 95% fail. I don't look at these things as failure. POCs at that stage is like a science experiment. You prove the hypothesis, you disprove it, or you don't have enough data, right? And that's really the way that we're learning about how these things. So we have to see like what exactly is definition. But what we're seeing in the market today, where we are kind of active, and I kind of broke down the types of agent into like two types of groups. One of them is like, productivity agents. This is the stuff that goes into your IDE, then the assistants, things that definitely makes your life easier, but are still derived from a human interaction, right? There's somebody that tells them what to do and they're good at it, right? So we, build our own tool that we created. It's called Ness, which is like a workbench for product engineering. So it's got a complete PLDC structure where you can code, you can look at requirements, you can understand, interactions with Jira and with GitHub and all that kind of stuff. So it's quite powerful and interesting. But this is, I think, where most of the market is today, where we are seeing more interesting use cases, more kind of the business agents, right? And this is where we start tackling business workflows, streamlining operations, incident management. These are much more complex. I do think that they have a lot more value as well, right? And if we talk about value or impact, this has to be understood from the lens of the business. What is value? And it's contextual, right? It's every company looks at it differently. This can be things like, save me money or make me more productive or, prevent risk or whatever the thing is. That's where we need to focus on. Now, lucky for us, we had a really good example a couple of weeks ago where one of the hyperscalers, went down for 14 hours. That would be a problem worth trying to solve with an agentic AI logic, right? It wasn't a hardware failure. It wasn't, regions being maxed out. It was literally something that it took humans, they solved it. It just took them a lot of time, right? And these are the class of problems that we want to focus on because I think they're interesting. They're complex enough, but they're solvable if we're just connecting all the dots together. I like the ones that are in the anomaly detection type of a space. We're pretty good at detecting the anomalies. We've been doing this for quite some time. And moving from, I know that there's an anomaly, to actually now preventing it, remediating it, alerting it on time, giving the user, and that was the demo that we showed before, right? I'm sensing something, let me do all the heavy lifting research and I'll give you a recommendation to fix it. I think that's super interesting. There's an enormous amount of value for clients there. If you speak with some clients, 1% production improvement, which can be derived from predictive maintenance, is worth millions. right, for these companies. So these are the areas where we're trying to kind of focus on with our clients to try to understand some of these things.
Yeah.
So again, agentic can shorten that loop of the human in the middle, human in the loop type of a thing where we have to like connect a lot of different things and do some reasoning and context and patterns. Agentic AI does that really, really well.
Yeah.
Obviously, figuring out all the other stuff about boundaries and governance and control, and this is like building trust, right? If we look at these agents like they're workers, we got to trust them, and we don't trust them yet. So.
Now, thank you for that. And unfortunately, like everything good, we've run out of time. So first of all, thank you for collaborating me on this session. Hopefully, folks in attendance, got away with some good insight, good information from an actual practitioner as to what they're doing out there with customers. Thank you for attending this session. And if you'd like to become a Redpanda partner,
one closing thoughts.
Please, yeah.
A ton of hype out there, really a ton of hype, and I see this hype as noise into the system. But if you peel away the noise, we definitely see the trend. Yeah. And folks that have been in that industry for a while understand where that trend is heading. I think we're in the right direction. I'm pretty sure we're going to solve it, and we'll do some pretty cool stuff together. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Last word, if you're looking to become a Redpanda partner, please go to redpanda.com/partners to apply. And with that, we'll close this session. Alex, if you're out there, back to you.
Thank you. It's always fun. Thank you, Romano, for joining us. Like you listen, please go and register if you want to be a partner. That was a fun session.